In this Titan Quest 2 video, I'm going to be talking about my hands-on impressions with the Titan Quest 2 playtest that just dropped a couple hours ago. If you guys haven't heard about this, there is a playtest on Steam for this that you can request access to, and if you get accepted, that you can play through. My understanding is that this playtest will run through Sunday, so you don't have a very long time to check this out. So if you want to check it out, go over to Steam, request access, and then continue watching this video. So the Titan Quest 2 playtest is about the first hour or so of the game from what it seems like. I don't know if it's actually the game or not, like in terms of if it's going to be the exact beginning of the game or if they've changed it a little bit for the playtest. But you do get to play about an hour of the game, and you do get to see a new skill tree, a new mastery in the Earth Mastery, which makes a return from the first game. And you can see some returning skills there as well. I'm going to be showcasing in this video a lot of Earth gameplay since I have already played Warfare and Storm in a previous version of this game. Also, if you do want to see the full skill trees that are in this playtest, we'll have those at the end of the video, so you can skip to the end if you want to see the Earth skill tree, the Storm skill tree, and the Warfare skill tree, or at least what they have in the game so far. So the first thing that's new in this playtest is that you'll have the option to select two masteries like you could in the first game. I chose Earth and Warfare, making me a battle mage, and again, just like the first game, you're going to see a name be chosen for you based on the masteries that you pick. And the skill that I ended up using for most of my playthrough was the Fisher from the Earth skill. And this kind of sends out a line of damage, and it can be modified in different ways. And one of the things about Titan Quest 2 is that when you upgrade a skill repeatedly, you'll keep increasing the amount you can modify that skill. So you get heavily rewarded for leaning into one skill or a couple of skills over many skills, just kind of like you were in the first game. You didn't have the modifications in the first game, but you were sort of encouraged by the fact that they became more effective the more points you dropped in. So here you get modifications, and you can do things to this like add more waves that go out, change the type of damage, add a fire trail, make it stun enemies. There are lots of different things that you can do to these skills, and I feel like a lot of replay value in this game, or a lot of fun in this game and tinkering, is messing around with this. I probably spent a good 10-15 minutes of my hour and a half that I played just tinkering with the skills modifications alone to see what I could get. And of course, every time I leveled up, I had more points to play around. I would move these around to be most effective, and it was really, really fun to do. And that was just with one skill. So I cannot wait to see this like with a full version of this game. Another thing I noticed is that you can dual wield from the very beginning of the game, unlike in Titan Quest 1 where you had to take very specific passives in order to be able to dual wield with certain masteries. You can do that from the very beginning. And also, you can cleave through enemies with regular attacks, depending on what weapons you're using. Seems like melee weapons will cleave through multiple enemies, which should make melee a little bit easier to use than in Titan Quest 1. So something interesting, though, is that the story seems to be gating the selection of both masteries. Previously, in Titan Quest 1, you had to get to level 8 before your second mastery would unlock, but it looks like they've gated it behind story mechanics here. It does seem like you'll get your second mastery faster if it remains this way in the full version of the game, because it only took like 20-30 minutes in order to get that second mastery unlocked. In fact, it was very, very quickly after the first mastery that I got it. So if you're someone who wants to get to that second mastery sooner, like if you played Titan Quest 1 a lot and you kind of didn't like having to get to level 8 to get a second mastery, the good news is you should be able to get your second mastery more quickly in this game. The bad news is that I wasn't able to opt out of selecting the mastery. Like I couldn't just take the points and put it, back into the Earth tree and delay selecting my mastery longer. I don't know if that's going to be in the full version of the game. Highly suspect it will, because in the first game you could just not choose a second mastery as long as you wanted, basically, and I think they're probably going to have that in the full version of the game as well. Something else interesting that I noticed is that mastery levels seem to be gated behind story progression, behind something called divinity, rather than investing points into the mastery level of that mastery. So it doesn't seem like you can just rush a mastery to get up to like a really OP skill and then, pick that skill and then absolutely dominate early on. But instead, like, you have to progress the main story of the game in order to be able to have access to stronger and stronger skills. I don't think this is going to be a huge difference for most players in the grand scheme of things anyway, because if they do it correctly, it should feel about like you're unlocking these skills at the same speed you would be if you were trying to rush those things anyway. Might be a little bit slower, but one of the things I noticed was that what I really liked was because you can respec, which you can do basically anytime you want for just gold, and you don't have points in the mastery level itself like you did in the first game. When you respec, you're not like, those points in the mastery that you couldn't pull out when you respec in the first game. Now you can pull out all your skill points. So you can respec a lot more effectively than you could in the first game. Something else I noticed was that loot felt like it was getting more OP more quickly than the first game. Like, I was getting things that I felt like were really, really strong very, very quickly. Things that had, like, plus 14% critical chance, plus 15% attack speed, plus damage. Like, it was crazy the amount of things I felt like I was getting earlier on in the game than I would see in Titan Quest 1. So I feel like you're going to feel like you're getting powerful more quickly in Titan Quest 2, which I actually quite like. So, and another thing that's really interesting is that they had 2 itemization options for colors on the itemization. They have, like, the modern itemization colors that you would probably see in more modern ARPGs. And they also have the classic colors from original Titan Quest. Found myself going back to classic just because I'm more familiar with them in Titan Quest. I really like the option to change between these at will. Another thing that's interesting is there are far more attributes than there are in Titan Quest 1, with gears having requirements of these different combinations of attributes. So I feel like it's likely that gear is going to be more build specific than it was in the previous game. Like, you won't be able to use one armor piece on like 10 different builds, maybe to be narrowed down to 5 builds in this game, because only certain builds are going to have those, or certain classes are going to have those attribute points, or certain other ones probably won't need them as much. So I'd be curious to see how that plays out in the full version of the game. It's also a great idea to save your attribute points until you find that piece of equipment that you kind of gen with, and you know, you're like, oh, this is really good, I want to use this. Because just like the first game, you never know what you're going to get loot wise. It has a pretty wide loot pool. And if you invest your points blindly when you pick up something that may not have the requirements for, you won't be able to use it. But if you save them, then you drop your points into the right places and you can use it immediately. It's a little bit more rewarding that way. So highly recommend that if you're doing the demo or you're playing the full version of the game. And something I can just see is like the full potential of builds when it comes to Titan Quest 2. It's going to have even more potential than the first game, not only because of the itemization, but because of the skill trees and the modifications that have been added that really allow you to tweak the way skills are used. You also have like basic attacks and things like that that can be modified at the bottom of each skill tree. So that's really interesting to see how that's going to play out. I didn't play around with that too much, but that's also going to factor into your build. The fact that you have 2 skill trees, what combinations do you have? Things like that are really going to be really interesting, I find. Like, for instance, I took a bow and I was playing with Earth and Warfare was also increasing my attack speed and my damage with a bow, which is something new because previously that was something that was relegated to hunting in the first game, which makes me wonder if we're going to see a hunting skill tree in this game, or if it's going to become redundant, or if we'll have less skill trees at launch, or maybe they'll be more consolidated. I'm just not sure yet. But the build variety itself should be really, really good in Titan Quest 2, especially if the itemization remains more or less the same as it did in the first game. We're seeing that pretty much here with maybe a little bit more of specialization in terms of who can use what. And the storytelling of Titan Quest 2 seems way improved from the first game. They've really made an effort here. You have the really cool cutscene at the beginning like you did in the first game. But then, like, in-game, it feels like you're interacting more with NPCs. They're doing things with them. The voice acting is really good. And I just was more interested in the story as a whole already than I ever was in Titan Quest 1. Because it's just told already in a much better way, and we're still very early on. And the boss fight that you do at the end of the demo really utilizes the new dodge and barrier mechanics that are added to the game far more than you'll use them when you're fighting trash mobs. When you're fighting trash mobs, you really don't use them that much. You use the dodge for positioning for spells, particularly in my case because I was using a cone-shaped spell. It made sense to dodge into a place where my cone was going to hit more enemies. I really liked that addition. But I found myself using these mechanics far more in the boss fight than before. And also, because of the limited potions that you have now, you have 2 health potions and 1 mana potion that replenish by, it seems like, attacking enemies. You really have to play well during the boss fight in order to defeat it, because if you just, you know, go through your health potions in 5 seconds and then you keep taking damage, you have no way to replenish your health. So it can be quite challenging, I think, especially with the boss fight taking into account that you have these new mechanics. It's factoring that into it, and you're not just going to go in there and, like, face tank a boss. However, in my case, I found that being very aggressive worked really, really well against the boss. I kind of like got in front of him or got up close to him, which prevented his ranged attacks, and just damaged him with my attacks as much as I could, which allowed me to heal almost as fast as the damage I was taking with the setup I had. It also allowed me to dodge behind him and get behind a lot of his attacks because he couldn't turn a full 180 degrees most of the time. So there are strategies that you still can apply that you know, may have worked in like a previous game, and I don't know if will work for every single build, but definitely will work for some builds. All in all, I'm even more excited for Titan Quest 2. It very much feels like Titan Quest, which is a slower paced ARPG than a lot of other ones out there. I feel like the leveling experience in the campaign of Titan Quest are more fun than other ARPGs out there, just from the way they are. And Titan Quest 2 seems like it's going to be that way as well. And I think a big part of this, which I mentioned in my other video, is because the amount of skill points you get every level. Every time you level up, you feel like your build is getting stronger and changing a lot. You can do a lot of different things. You spend a good amount of time looking at what you can do when you level up, rather than just clicking one skill and moving on. And because dual masteries make a return, it's just going to add so much replayability to the game. And since you usually focus on one or two key skills, not unlike Titan Quest 1, you're going to see a lot of builds within the same masteries. You know, you're going to see battle mages, for instance, like mine, that are different, completely different. They're a battle mage, but they play with completely different skills and completely different gear. And even you're going to have this, like, all these different multi-classes you can make, but then different builds inside those multi-classes, and it's going to be great. And there are only two things that I think are really negatives from what I played so far in the playtest, and one is performance. I was getting between 45 to 60 FPS most of the time on 1440p on the highest settings on a 3080 Ti with a 12900K processor. It seemed a bit low considering the game looks good, but I didn't think I should be getting that low of performance for what I'm playing. It's kind of funny though, because the first game had beefy system requirements and was also very, very difficult to play on high FPS at launch, although it looked really good on low settings. And the other complaint that I have is I do not like the UI in this game at all in the menu screens, and particularly the skill trees and things like that. I really, really dislike the way it looks. It's not nearly as good as the first game. I really hope they do some work on the way the skill trees work and your attribute screen works and all that stuff. This is stuff that could very easily be changed before the launch of this game. We don't even have a release date, because this is not like animation or balancing. It's literally just the way the game is presented. And I really hope that gets a tune-up between now and whenever the game launches. So that wraps up my video on Titan Quest 2. I hope you guys got some useful information from this. If you haven't played the playtest yet, go request access and see if you can get in. Again, I think it runs through Sunday, so you have some time even if you don't get in immediately. Let me know what you think if you played it. Let me know what you think if you haven't and you've seen the gameplay. Let me know in the comments below.